Today I'm going to start setting mozzarella back into a modified Continental trim. She was in this trim 2 years ago, but coat change got the better of us. I decided to try again, but this time I'll do a bubble instead of a scissor top knot. I quickly cut in her legs before the bath. I'm leaving the bracelets higher for the time being, and I will adjust the height of them once she has grown out a bit more. I decided to mostly go with the grain first. The next time I groom her, I'll go in reverse and then progressively go shorter each time I do her, letting her skin get used to it. But right now I just want to have less hair to wash and blow dry. It's magically the next day. I was tired after washing and blow drying her, so I just refluff dry the areas I plan on grooming today, mainly her jacket and rosettes. I use a slicker and just quickly go over her. I didn't want to waste all my arm energy on fluff drying. After she's combed out, I will restack her in front of the mirror and start on her rosettes. I find where her rear is about a third of her length and use my straight shears to set a line straight from her tuck up over her top line. I comb and re-scissor a few times to make the line more defined. Then I go to the other side and use my shears to draw a straight line in her hair from her top line down to her underline. Then I set in the line with my straights, combing and scissoring to make it more defined. Next, I start to divide her rosettes, making a straight line from her tail to the line I made at the back of her jacket. I should have moved my table so that I stood directly behind her, but I needed to move my table to do that, and I decided that that was a later Caitlin problem. Next, I comb her jacket forward and go in with my 10 blade on my Spectra, and start to shave a line in between her rosettes and the jacket. I like the jacket and rosettes to almost be kissing, but it's harder to do with a 10 blade with the lay of the coat. I'll be able to keep the line smaller when I can go shorter. Then I comb all of the jacket hair over the shave line and use my straights to trim off what's hanging over so I can see better. Then I do the same on the other side. I comb all of her jacket hair forward and then using my Spectra to make a more defined line, and then I go in with my straights so I can see it better. Once I do both sides, I do in between the rosettes. This is where I really should have stood behind her to make sure it was properly centered. Then I comb the hair over the edges of the rectangular rosettes and start cutting off the excess with my straight shears. This is when I notice just how off-center my rosettes are. You can see how it really leans to the right side since I wasn't standing behind her. To fix it, I will just make it a little wider and then do better next time. I also noticed the back of my rosettes weren't even, so I shaved the back of one of the rosettes more. Then I go in with the Spectra and start to round off the corners. I use my left hand to hold the hair over the rosette so I can see the edge easier. Then I comb the hair over the edge and use my curves to cut off the excess and start to shape it more. It helps me figure out what else I need to cut off. And you can also see where I cut off too much. I repeat the steps between using the Spectra and the scissors to shape the rosette. I like working in front of a mirror so I can see both sides at the same time. It helps with symmetry. Once I'm happy with the outside shape, I will round it more over the top. Next, I clean up the clipper work on her front leg so I can trim the bottom of her jacket. I trim everything hanging over her shave line, including the chest hair between her front legs. Then I trim the back of her jacket so it flows smoothly into her underline. After we took a break, I trim off all the extra hair she has on the side of her jacket above her arm. I wanted it to look more lifted. I realize I have to shave the rest of her face and neck in order to keep working on her front, so I stop and shave that. I have a more detailed video on shaving faces if you want to see how I do it. After I finish my clipper work, I scissor off all the excess hair around her neck shave line with my straight shears. I hold her ear up so I can see the shape and figure out what I want to cut off next. I start to cut behind her ear down her neck. I'm growing her crest back out, so I'm just blending the area for now. And here I totally make a mistake combing and get it tangled in her top knot.
Oh no.
Once I carefully get it out, I continued. I use my extreme curves to blend in her crest transition a bit. Next, I comb up all the hair on the front and go back in with my straights to clean up some things I noticed. Then I switch to my curves and start rounding the front. Once I'm done around her neck, I put her chin rest back up. Scissor some more, then look at her outline to see if there's any more changes I want to make before I do the other side. Then I give her another little break and do the other side. I take off all the hair hanging over my shave line and clean up my clipper work. Next, I take my straight shears and match my other side, trimming straight across her chest and underline to what I already did. I mostly use straight shears for this, but I do switch to my chunkers for blending her chest between her front legs. Next, I trim the side of her jacket above her arm with my curves. I want it nice and tight, especially since she doesn't have much hair filling the space behind her front leg. I compare it to the other side for symmetry. Next, I'll trim her neckline so it's not going past her shave line. Then I start to scissor back into the neckline. I hold her ears up to compare both sides of her neck. I'm happy with it, so I move on to the front of her chest. Her body was shaved not too long ago, but I left a chest piece because I knew I would do this soon, so I do my best to blend them together. I restack her and bevel the back of her jacket. Next, I clean up her clipper work on her rear legs and the base of her tail. I'm getting the obvious patches that I missed before her bath. I also clean up the back of her jacket and her underline with clippers and shears. Next is her tail. It is way too long, so I trim off the excess so I can brush it out easier. Then I comb it all down towards the bottom and use my curves to trim the end a bit. I'm doing the lazy trim here. Normally I would trim all the hair hanging down over the shave line, but I skipped this step and just combed her tail in half. Then I trimmed the sides so the bottom was connected to the top. I bevel it down a bit and then do the same thing on the other side of her tail, trimming the outside and beveling it down. Then I comb all of her tail hair down and trim the very bottom and connect it to the sides that I trimmed. I hold the tail up and shake it out a bit so I can see how it naturally falls. Then I comb all of the hair to the front of her tail and pinch it with my hand to keep it there, and hold it forward and then trim off what's falling outside of my shape. I do that again, and then I shake it out a couple times to see what naturally falls out. And then I said good enough. Last, I'm going to trim Mozzarella's ears. I want to do her whole head, but we will have to wait for that until next week. I brush out her head and ears that aren't banded. I trim her ears about a finger width from the bottom straight across. Her ears aren't the same, so I gave myself some room to make them even. I stand in front of her to make sure her ears are the same. After I trim both ears, I comb all of the hair straight back behind her neck and connect both ears behind her head. Then I round off the back of her ears into the back of her head. I comb her out, give her head a shake, and also hold up the back of her ears to check for symmetry and if I should fix anything. I go in with my chunkers to blend her ears a bit more, and then we're done for this week's session. There's a lot I want to change, but I'm really excited to work on this trim again. Check back in the coming weeks to see how this trim has progressed. If you learned something, like the video, comment any questions you have, subscribe to learn more, and thank you for watching.